Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, and we are continuing a series that we ran last year throughout the NFL season. Had a ton of fun doing it, and I think it's a great thing to bring back for this upcoming NFL season, which is just a couple of days away by the time this airs on the channel. And I'm super excited for it, as you could see from the thumbnail title and what you're seeing on the screen now with the graphics. We're talking about NFL Week 1 predictions and pick'em. Of course, this is going to continue throughout the course of the NFL season, all the way through week 18, all the way through the NFL playoffs. And probably just a spoiler here, I'm going to get my butt kicked again as I'm joined by the NFL wizard himself, Austin Host. Welcome to the stream, or welcome to the video here, Austin. Super glad to be continuing predictions and pick'em. How many games are you going to beat me by this year?
Well, last year was a narrow margin of victory, so I think it'll be close this year, but in favor of you this time. I won't get so lucky this time around.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. If we have difference of opinion, if you guys are playing for money, I would recommend TTW. Trust the wizard. Go with what Austin's predicting for the week. And now as we get in here, just like we did last year, let's start with our pick'em records. We're 0-0. Someone take a screenshot. This is the one time I'm tied with Austin this year. Super excited for that fact. And now moving on into our locks. This is, of course, the games we feel most comfortable with this week. For me, I'm going with the Tennessee Titans over the New York Giants. I think just flat out, they're better basically at every single position, top to bottom. And I think the Tennessee Titans are going to run the New York Giants this week. Giants fans, not trying to be super critical of you, but you have a regime change here. First game. Hopefully they come out inspired and play super well, but my guess is the Tennessee Titans best the New York Giants this week rather comfortably, just given the fact that there's consistency. They have a great running back. They've also added some good wide receiver play in Robert Woods and Treylon Burks. I really like what Tennessee's got this week. And Austin, you went with the San Francisco 49ers over the Chicago Bears. Break down your reasoning and rationale for that one.
I know there's a lot of, hesitancy with people in the 49ers right now just because of the unknown at the quarterback position, but I look at the Chicago Bears as a team that is, rebuilding at this current moment. The San Francisco 49ers are going to dominate this game in the trenches. Their defensive line is just so talented when you look across it. And it's going to give this young, inexperienced Chicago Bears offensive line a lot of issues. Justin Fields going to be under duress constantly during the course of the game. Obviously having David Montgomery and Darnell Mooney is going to be, a big factor for Justin Fields' development, but I just feel like he's not going to have enough time to, really let the plays develop. He's going to be running a lot in this game.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing that Justin Fields is rather athletic, because he's going to be needing those legs to stay away from that 49ers front seven. And now as we move into our upsets, and this is really where we get into some fun discussion on what teams do we think could come out, beat the odds this week and pull off a big win. I've got my New York Jets upsetting the Baltimore Ravens. And if you're new to the channel, you might think, oh, great, we've got a Homer fan here. Last year I picked against the Jets every single week. This week, I think we can get the job done. Robert Saleh helping this team come along. And I also really believe in JD, what he's doing with this roster. They're one of the teams that had the most claims during the waiver wire week. It's because this team has a little bit more depth than I'm accustomed to seeing over the last decade of football. And I think the Ravens, with some of the drama there with Lamar Jackson, maybe are liable to an upset loss this week in week 1. And Austin, you're going to the NFC North rivalry between the Minnesota Vikings, Green Bay Packers. Break this one down. Does it matter where this game is played?
I think that's actually a tipping factor. I think they're going to split the season series. They're at home. The Vikings are at home in this one. Therefore, I think giving them the slight edge. There's a lot of excitement surrounding this franchise right now. Green Bay obviously trying to figure out the receiver situation. They're going to work out the kinks, part of the way through the season. But I think week 1 with a lot of inexperienced wide receivers, I just don't see it, going super well in that realm. I think it'll be a close game, but I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to come off hot and they're going to win that game.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this matchup, seeing what Kevin O'Connell's offense really looks like. They're utilizing Jay Jettas, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Dalvin Cook as well. Hopefully Kirk Cousins is due for another great season in Minnesota. And now as we get into Thursday Night Football, and this is arguably the game of the week, which is why they scheduled it for the first game of the season. What a great matchup we have here. We have the Buffalo Bills, who recently added Von Miller to this roster, facing off against his former team, the team he won a Super Bowl with, the Los Angeles Rams. And you can already see here, we have divide on who we're going with. Austin's going Bills on the road. I'm going Rams at home. Austin, break us down first on your rationale with the Buffalo Bills.
I think the Buffalo Bills present the Rams a lot of different challenges. When you look at their wide receivers, I look at Stephon Diggs and obviously Gabriel Davis are going to be two big factors in this one. Diggs versus Ramsey is going to play a huge factor in this one. I'm kind of excited to see the utilization of James Cook as well. That very well could play a big factor in this one. Brian Dable being gone definitely changes the offense. So I think that's where you can make the for sure argument that, oh, the Rams could be out on top. However, I just think Josh Allen's going to will this team to a win in week 1. They're playing in Los Angeles, where obviously, a big bump for the Rams, but I just don't think it's going to deter the Bills enough to lose that one.
Yeah, I like all the points you made, especially there for, how the Bills and Rams match up on one side of the football. But I am really worried for the Bills. No Tre'Davious White this week since he was on the PUP list. He's out for at least the first 4 games after being put on IR. And now with me going with the Rams, I just don't know who's going to match up with, of course, Cooper Kupp there. He's one of the most dynamic receivers in the league, won the Triple Crown last year as a receiver. But when you look at this Rams offense, they can also move the ball if Cam Akers comes back healthy this season. Don't forget they added Allen Robinson. There's a lot of offensive weapons for Stafford to work around. And I think it's going to be a tough matchup week 1 for the Bills without Tre'Davious White. But again, I still think this is a very competitive game and 2 of the best teams in the entire NFL. Which brings us now to the Sunday slate, where there's a collection of other really good games, a lot of divisional games and out of division games as well, which really gives a fun blend throughout the first week of the NFL season. And we've got Detroit hosting the Philadelphia Eagles in one of the first games of the year. Of course, this is a noontime slot, Austin. And you've got the Eagles, as do I, taking out the Detroit Lions. Really break this one down. And why do the Eagles, with their new weapon in A.J. Brown, take down the HBO Detroit Lions?
I think the Lions are a fun storyline. I think they've done a really good job during the course of the offseason improving their roster. A lot of people, we got to pump the brakes on them a little bit. I just don't think they're better than the Eagles. The Eagles also got a lot better during the offseason, A.J. Brown being a huge addition for this team. They still have Devontae Smith. I think there's a lot of different things that you can look at with the Eagles. They've just got better up front. The secondary, there's so much to like about what the Eagles had done in the offseason period. I think Jalen Hurts is going to take another step forward. Jared Goff, we kind of know what he's going to be. The Lions are better than they were last year, adding Aiden Hutchinson in the draft, but it's not enough to overcome the talent deficit that these two teams currently have.
Right. There is a pretty wide margin, I would say, between these two teams. Dan Campbell gets his guys to show up and play, but I think the Eagles are just a little bit more talented. And when you look at Jordan Davis as well, I think that's going to be one of the fun matchups to watch here is Philadelphia's defensive line against Detroit's pretty solid and stout offensive line. If Detroit's going to win this game, it's going to be at the point of attack. If they can take care of business up there and really open up running lanes for DeAndre Swift, that's where they're going to have a shot here. But ultimately, I do prefer Philly as well. Moving on into our next step of games here, we got the San Francisco 49ers heading into Chicago. And so far, we're taking 2 NFC North losses with the Lions and now the Bears. Both of us go with San Francisco here. And I think, Austin, like you said, in the locks category, where you talked about San Fran really having the huge advantage here with that defensive line play that they have. Nick Bosa is going to have his way in this game, if I had to guess. And just overall, this entire defensive line, you go into the front 7 and Fred Warner's there. They also improved in their secondary with Charvarius Ward. I mean, this team is just flat out better than Chicago. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I just think, once again, Trey Lance could definitely, really change the course of the game, either for the better or for the worse, because he could have a very shaky performance. He's a rookie. He's a second-year guy. He's nervous. I think that could tip the balance, but I'm pretty confident, even with some of those, mistakes from, a guy that's very inexperienced, I'm not super worried about it.
Right. I think that they're going to have enough talent there to overcome that. And of course, Kyle Shanahan's going to use Deebo Samuel as that little security blanket, whether that's running the football, catching the ball on short routes, or, just kind of being that do-it-all wide back that he really made famous last season. We're going to see a lot of him in this matchup. Now, as we move into Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Cincinnati Bengals, this is an AFC North game, and divisional games always play out a little bit funkier than you would expect just based on the roster on paper. For example, here, I really like the Bengals roster. I think the Bengals are a better team than Pittsburgh, but I think Pittsburgh could be sneaky here, especially when the Bengals have such a high expectation now after making the Super Bowl last year. Even though I prefer the Bengals roster, I think with Mitch Trubisky there, Pittsburgh, there's less film on what their offense is going to look like with this guy. Whereas the Steelers, their defensive coordinators and their defensive staff know exactly what the Bengals are going to look to do. That's going to be air it out and then use Joe Mixon as that change of pace to what their offense is going to look like. And for me, I think Pittsburgh with TJ Watt, some of the great defensive line play they have with Cameron Hayward as well, they can make a lot of things happen. And I have them pulling out a margin of victory by about 3 points. Austin, you're going with the Bengals, though, who are the favorite in this game at home. It's probably a safer bet than me, which is why I'm not the wizard. You are. Break down this matchup. Why do you have Cincy winning?
I just like Cincinnati's weapons, and you had alluded to it already. You know, having Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, that's a really good group there. And I also think guys like Hayden Hurst are going to step up big time for the Bengals. Their offensive line drastically improved in the offseason. La'el Collins is going to be a big piece up front for them. They had arguably the worst offensive line in the entire league last year and made that improvement. They made it to the Super Bowl even with that. So I feel pretty confident that they're going to have another stellar season. I think regular season wise, they're going to even be better than last year. So looking at that, I have some concerns about Mitchell Trubisky. The Steelers offensive line is also atrocious. I'm very concerned about that. But I think they're going to make it a much more competitive game than people realize. I think it will be a narrow margin of victory for the Bengals. But at the end of the day, I could see where Pittsburgh could go ahead and make that upset. But I have quite a bit of confidence, surprisingly, in the Bengals.
I do have one generic question here for you, just on the topic of divisional rivalries. Do you think it's a good idea from the NFL to schedule a divisional game like this one in week 1 of the NFL season?
I think, honestly, the NFL should go with the idea of scheduling the worst possible matchups for week 1. The teams that, aren't super competitive, maybe playing a good team. I think they need to make it where the ratings that should be the lowest are played in week 1, because there's going to be so much buzz around the season anyway. You don't need a divisional game to spark it. We'll get to the Vikings Packers later, but I think that's much better suited for a little later on in the season where fandom might be kind of wavering a little bit and you have other sports going on, like, you have the NBA, the NHL going on. I think that's probably where you want to slot those divisional games.
That's a really great point there with just the marketing of the sport, not even just the competitive nature there, but also just getting fan involvement. That's a great point you make. And now as we move on to another divisional game, we've got the New England Patriots heading into Miami. And we talked about them quite a bit off camera, Austin, and we both kind of wavered on this. Patriots, they just always find ways to win. Bill Belichick, one of the greatest coaches of all time, if not the greatest coach. But Miami's kind of sneaky. They added in Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle was phenomenal as a rookie. We expect him to take another step forward in year 2. Tua Tagovailoa's looked pretty good in a lot of the film coming out of camp. Then again, who doesn't look good in camp? You know what I mean? But we both edged with the Dolphins while they're in Miami this week. Break down this matchup. What are some of the keys to watch for? New England no longer has Mr. INT himself, J.C. Jackson.
J.C. Jackson's absence alone definitely gives me the utmost confidence that Miami can win this game while they're at home. J.C. Jackson was a true lockdown corner and turnover generator. So I think when you look at that, that definitely plays a factor, because now you have two absolute speedsters in Miami, really taking the top off the defense or hurting you a ton underneath and seeing a ton of rack with it. So that's why I feel like the Dolphins could definitely generate some offense here. And it's kind of funny, Bill Belichick doesn't struggle a lot of places, but it seems like there's always weird things that happen in Miami. Whether it's Gronk not having the angle or whatever it may be, there's weird things that happen in these kind of games when they are in Miami.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to watch for. I know a lot of people love to make fun of Tua Tagovailoa, and for, certain reasons that is deserved. But I think a lot of people are kind of underestimating how this new regime in Miami is going to utilize not only Jalen Waddle, but also Tyreek Hill with their speed. Everyone looks at them as deep threats, which to certain components they for sure are. But I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talked about the underneath component as well of this offense. They're going to find a lot of ways to make the job easier for Tua Tagovailoa, which is why I think the addition of Tyreek Hill was so important. Austin, talk about his development a little bit from where he was, say 4 years ago with Alex Smith to where he currently is at this point.
He was where Mecole Hardman is kind of been in his whole career. I think very similar in terms of, the speed and the elusiveness, but his progression as a route runner has what's made him a superstar. You can't just be fast in this league. We've seen it with, guys like John Ross. They don't work. You have to have a certain element of route running, the ability to make guys miss rather than just having true straight line speed, and his ability to make guys miss and, the true pure route running that we've seen from him are big reasons why he's taking that jump into superstardom.
Yeah, special talent for sure. And as we move into our next game, this is a fun one. This is probably one of my most looked forward to games this week, and it's the Cleveland Browns at the Carolina Panthers, and we're split here again. You've got the Browns, I've got the Panthers. Let's hear from your perspective, and then I'll break down why I'm winning with the Panthers this week.
I think that the Cleveland Browns are definitely going to put a lot of stress on Carolina's defensive line, because with having Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt pounding the ball down your throat all game long, and having a true game manager in Jacoby Brissett is going to help. Obviously, I feel like if Deshaun Watson's playing in this game, it's a shoe-in, no-brainer, but Jacoby Brissett definitely makes it a little tougher. And we also have the element of Baker Mayfield against the Browns, just having that added emotion. Baker has struggled mightily in camp, so I'm kind of curious to see if that translates to week one, or is that just some weird interceptions that are happening. I think he's definitely still struggling from last year, and that's why I have a little more confidence in Jacoby Brissett maintaining possession of the football and them running it. And I have a feeling that Cleveland's defense is once again going to be too much for this Carolina offense.
Right, I agree with you there. Brissett's a little bit less likely to cost you a game, like Baker Mayfield occasionally can do with his interception numbers and just how frequently he occasionally turns over the football. But my key word for this matchup is motivation. When I look at Baker Mayfield, he's already heading into a contract year, so there should be a ton of motivation for his financial future in the NFL. But on top of that, you're facing your former team and you can stick it to him. And I think with Baker Mayfield's charisma, everything that he is as a human being, his personality, he's going to be so prepared for this week. I think he's going to really stick it to Cleveland. And I mean, really, I see this game being a 2-score game at the end of it, even though I think Cleveland flat out has the better roster than Carolina. And I think Baker Mayfield's going to have a really good game this week. Now, hopefully you guys aren't clipping this because I'm not fully confident in that. But it's one of those things that if it doesn't pan out well, this will be all over Twitter. But if it does pan out well, I'm going to feel like a genius. I'm riding with the Panthers this week. Probably the only time all year, but I'm riding with them in week one. Moving on to Colts at Texans, and this is probably one of the more boring matchups of the first week. Sorry if you're a fan of these teams, especially if you're a Texans fan. Colts fans, you have a little bit more to be excited for because I think this is going to be a real romping out in Houston. Texans are improving this roster, but I don't think that this season is really going to be one that they're going to want to hang their hat on. It's more still of that rebuild process right now in Houston. Austin, how many yards does Jonathan Taylor have this game?
I say he goes for 120, if I'm going to be honest. I think he's going to have 120 yards on the ground, maybe 40 through the air. I just feel like this is going to be a tough game for the Texans. They're going to be constantly battling uphill. Davis Mills is going to be throwing the ball a ton, just because Indianapolis is so good at running the football, maintaining possession, especially with Matt Ryan at quarterback, a guy that has true ball control and can really game manage to a victory. Now, he's not going to outgun another quarterback, but he does a really good job, maintaining the flow of the offense, keeping up pace, and just ensuring that, he doesn't get too out of rhythm with incompletions.
Right. He's a game manager plus, he's going to make sure that you're controlling the football, doing all the things you need to do to win, but he's got more arm talent than a guy like Alex Smith had. He's able to make plays. In the past, he's been looked at as a top 10 QB in the NFL. I'm not sure if he's still at that point, but I think with Michael Pittman there, those two are going to have a lot of chemistry and a lot of success on the outside. And like you said, Jonathan Taylor is going to be dominant. I'm excited to see how Dameon Pierce does. Of course, he's been listed as the RB1 for Houston. I'm interested to see how many carries Rex Burkhead gets. And if you're watching this game, you're probably going to have some fantasy implications involved, especially if you're still watching the third or fourth quarter of this one, if I had to guess. Then moving into another divisional game. And again, the NFL scheduled a ton of them. In week one this year, we got the New Orleans Saints heading into Atlanta, and we have another split decision here, Austin. You have the Saints, I have the Falcons. I'll start with my rationale. Arthur Smith has this team coached up. Last year, the Atlanta Falcons won 7 games, and part of that maybe is because Matt Ryan was there, but that roster was not good enough to win 7 games. and they played rather competitive throughout the year. And I thought it was a pretty impressive showing from a team that, quite frankly, the roster talent just wasn't there to match it. Kyle Pitts is heading into year 2. I think Demario Davis is a really good linebacker. I don't think he can hang with Kyle Pitts, who is one of the most versatile players in the entire NFL with his ability to line up outside, inside, and run a variety of routes. Of course, his athleticism really shows through at that tight end position. And I think the Falcons, they just got more tricks up their sleeves in terms of how they can use some of their offensive pieces. I think Mariota, it's a funny matchup because we have Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, of course, picks 1 and 2 in the same draft quite a while ago. But Austin, you have the Saints winning this one, who, again, I think they're probably a little bit of a better team, but I went with the Falcons at home.
I like the Saints offense so much more. I don't like Marcus Mariota, and it's no secret on the channel that I'm a Jameis Winston fangirl. I mean, his speeches really get me going. But looking at what this offense is, Jameis Winston, a guy that's capable of throwing for 5,000 yards. You have Alvin Kamara, one of the most skilled running backs in the entire league, can run the ball effectively, catch passes out of the backfield. Also, Chris Olave being added to this offense, Michael Thomas. I mean, the Saints were very, very competitive last year, and that was without any wide receivers. I mean, that was insane how good they were defensively as well. I think that transitions into this year and remains the case. They're going to be a top 5, scoring defense, in my opinion. I love the Saints here. Even though they're in Atlanta, I have a lot of confidence in my New Orleans pick.
I think that is a good selection. As we go through this, I'm starting to get nervous about my pick 'em here. I'm going to be a few games back by the end of week 1, I have a feeling. So we're going to have to be, making up ground. Make sure you guys stick with us through this NFL season to see if I can ever catch up with the Wizard. And as we get on to the next game, I'm really digging myself a hole here. This is the team I picked as the upset, my New York Jets. Definitely an upset type of pick here, even though they're at home. Their roster is way worse. Lamar Jackson could probably run for 150 yards potentially if everything falls apart. But the reason I went with New York, Sauce Gardner, I think he shuts down Rashad Bateman, and I think the Jets' improved front 7 will hopefully limit J.K. Dobbins, Mike Davis, and Lamar Jackson on the ground. And if they can do those two things, they win this football game, regardless of who's starting at quarterback. At the time we're recording, we do not know quite yet if it's going to be Zach Wilson, Mike White, or Joe Flacco. But it's all about the defense here for me for the New York Jets. Austin, break down your Ravens selection. Is it just because the Jets are the New York Jets?
I don't know if I have a lot of confidence in this game because I think Baltimore, with how good they were last year, there's a lot of moving pieces within the offense, a lot of injuries on defense, especially in that secondary. They're healthy, they're back, and they're one of the more talented rosters in the entire NFL, coached by one of the best coaches in the NFL. So I think the culmination of all of that leads to a team that's going to be super consistent and contending for a division title. I think, Robert Saleh being rah-rah week 1, might get the players going. But that message with these kind of coaches that are super rah-rah tend to fade away, once you lose many consecutive games, like we've seen with guys like Urban Meyer. We've seen it with Robert Saleh already. That message gets stale to players when all you can do is coach on emotion. I'm not trying to hate on Robert Saleh. I'm just saying that with those type of coaches, if you're not winning right away, it's an uphill battle there on out. John Harbaugh is a terrific coach, and I see them getting the road victory.
Yeah, I think, again, all good points there, pointing to Baltimore probably getting the win here in New Jersey in this matchup. The Jacksonville Jaguars head into the Washington Commanders, Austin, and I've really doubled down on some of my selections this week. For those of you who don't know why he's laughing and why I'm laughing so hard, Austin's a Jaguars fan. He notoriously picks against Jacksonville basically every week, except last year, one time picked them and they lost by like 24. But I'm going with Jacksonville here in this matchup for a few reasons. First of all, Jacksonville is one of those teams that, plays spoiler. And there's no better game to spoil than the first ever game for the Washington Commanders. And Carson Wentz tends to have a little bit of problems against this organization. If we go back to week 18 last year, Colts were on the cusp of the postseason and found themselves watching the playoffs at home, just like you and me, because of Jacksonville. And this team has really improved. Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd through the draft, Trayvon Walker through the draft, which I think was an excellent pick. And now they have a competent head coach. They're no longer relying on Urban Meyer and his antics. They have one of the best coaches in the league, in my opinion, in Doug Peterson, someone who really understands offense. And for a team that couldn't move the ball last year, They added a speedy wide receiver in Christian Kirk who can create separation both on the inside and out. They have a generational type QB in Trevor Lawrence that he just needs the potential pulled out of him. I think Doug Peterson can do it. And I've been going with versatility. Travis Etienne is that dude. He is someone who can catch the ball out of the backfield. And I think if there's an area of this defense you want to test for Washington, it's that secondary. And I think it's the linebacking core out in space. And I think Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones, those three can take advantage of this matchup here. And I have Jacksonville, again, playing spoiler on the road in the Commanders' debut. Austin probably taking the safer bet here, though, with Washington.
Yeah, it's just the right pick. I can't believe you threw away a pick like that, dude. Jacksonville is so bad still. I can't get over it. I think they're going to have some issues. Luke Fortner at center. I have my doubts about him. I have my doubts about the offensive line still, paying Cam Robinson all that money. Let's not even get into that. Let's talk about the game where I just think flat out Washington is a better team on paper. Once again, Ron Rivera is a very, very good coach. I think that's something you can kind of hang your hat on. Carson Wentz very well could struggle, but once again, I think Jacksonville with the new regime, first game, I mean, this team has literally won 4 games in the last 2 years. I mean, I think that's the only stat I have to say to rest my case.
You know, that's a fair one, but after week 1, I'm betting on that being 5 wins in 2 years and 1 week. So let's ride Jacksonville, #Duval County. Moving on into the next one here. We talked about this game at length a bit already. Green Bay Packers heading into Minnesota, and for all the same reasons, Austin, you outlined, I'm going with Minnesota at home very narrowly. I think KOC is going to have a nice offensive game plan here that utilizes Justin Jefferson in a way that we even haven't seen yet. Of course, Mike Zimmer, his tenure in Minnesota was highlighted by that defense, some of the elite defenses he built, but quite frankly, didn't know how to communicate with his quarterback, didn't know how to get his wide receivers involved, and really didn't have any offensive ingenuity or integrity, I would even say. And now you give a pretty good quarterback, someone who I think is right on the cusp of being in the top 10, if not in the top 10. And if you're a hater, go look at Kirk Cousins' numbers and then come back to this video and tell me I'm wrong. And then you look at Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Dalvin Cook. There's so many weapons. Irv Smith Jr. as well. I like Minnesota's offense a lot. I think Zadarius Smith maybe plays a big role as Minnesota transitions to a 3-4 as well. Austin, if Green Bay wins, we already know why you think Minnesota probably does. If Green Bay wins, what's it going to come down to?
I think once again, it's going to be picking on, the inexperienced corner. Maybe if Andrew Booth Jr. is out there, it's going to be picking on the young secondary. Lewis Cine at the safety spot, Andrew Booth Jr., both are draft picks. But once again, I have some reservations about the receiving core of Green Bay. It's really going to take Alan Lazard, Romeo Doubs, a couple of these other wide receivers on this Packers roster stepping up big time in order to beat them. Once again, I also think that there is a possibility with this transition to a 3-4 that maybe they're a little more susceptible to giving up a ton of rush yards. I think with the combination of Dillon and Jones, that very well could play into Green Bay's favor. And maybe they, opt for more of a rushing attack in this one.
Right. This is one of the first 3:00 games in the schedule, and I'm really excited for this matchup. I think it's going to be a great game between two really good NFC North rivals. Moving on, Giants at Titans. This was, of course, my lock here, as I think Tennessee at home is the clear and concise favorite here. Austin, I'm sure you feel the same way. I want to know, how many yards are you expecting for Derrick Henry on the ground, especially after the Tennessee Titans moved on, or after the New York Giants moved on from Blake Martinez? Do you think that will be a problem? And really, what do you see in this game?
Yeah, I definitely think Tennessee is going to run the ball heavily. They're going to rely on some play action, and Tennessee is a little bit of a wild card at that wide receiver position. I think New York has a lot of things to figure out offensively with Daniel Jones, but Brian Daboll should be able to pull the most out, squeeze the most out of the orange, if you will, with Daniel Jones. But I just don't have a ton of hope for New York in this one.
Yeah, I feel completely the same way. And as we move on to yet again another divisional game, AFC West, probably the best division in all of football. We've got two really darn good teams here. The Las Vegas Raiders, who had a ton of key acquisitions, head into SoFi Stadium to face the Los Angeles Chargers. I went Raiders, you went Chargers, and I don't care that this game is in LA. I think the Las Vegas Raiders, their fans, especially those that are still in Oakland, are going to travel to this game. There's going to be a ton of Raiders fans filling up the seats at SoFi Stadium. I really like the fact that Devontae Adams and Derek Carr played together in college. They already have some of that chemistry that I think they can regain quickly at the NFL level. It's not going to be the exact same, but I think with a talented receiver like him and a talented QB in Carr, they can make it work. And don't forget, everyone loves to talk about the Chargers additions, and they had some great ones. Don't forget that one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, in Chandler Jones, is now playing with Max Crosby. Those are the two rush ends there for Las Vegas. I think that they're going to provide a lot of problems. And I think ultimately the Chargers are going to have a tough task ahead of them with this improved Raiders defense and an elite wide receiver there to go along with Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. I really like this core of Raiders. You know, Austin, I tend to pick Las Vegas in a lot of these matchups. What do you think about the Chargers here? Why do you have them winning?
I think it all comes down to offensive line play for the Raiders. A very, very, very misfit group now. A lot of changes along that offensive line, and I have some real concerns. When you have guys like Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack coming after you, it's going to make for a long afternoon for any offensive line, no matter how talented they are. And I think the Raiders are a team that definitely could be deflated by poor offensive line play. Derek Carr is not a super mobile quarterback, so I think that's not really going to play into the hands of the Raiders. I think the Chargers are more talented. They're at home. And also I have a lot of concerns about the Raiders offensive line.
This, again, one of the best matchups of the first week of the season. This is a week 18 rematch last year where the Raiders beat the Chargers to get into the postseason. We'll see if this game has some real ramifications for how that AFC West shakes up toward the end of this year. Now moving into a matchup between two really talented teams again, Kansas City Chiefs, Arizona Cardinals. This game is in Arizona, but I have the Chiefs winning, as do you, Austin. I think Kansas City is still one of the more talented teams in the league. I know a lot of people are going to be worried about the Tyreek Hill departure. We talked about him and his talents quite a bit in the Miami segment. Why is it less of a big deal for Kansas City, especially with some of the other pieces they brought in?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Trent McDuffie and Sky Moore, two huge additions, having those two first-round picks definitely going to play a factor in this one. I think they're guys that were, pretty ready for the NFL level, especially McDuffie, a guy that very well could have been, deemed as a top 15, top 20 talent in the class. But, they were a little concerned about overall upside. But I think Kansas City is still going to do what they do and win regular season games, despite no Tyreek Hill. They still have Travis Kelce. I'm not super concerned about this team.
Right. Arizona is also without DeAndre Hopkins in this matchup, and hopefully George Karlaftis can get in there as well and cause some problems for Arizona's offensive line. I think this is going to be a really fun game, but ultimately I have Kansas City, just like you, Austin, coming out on top in this one. Which brings us to our Sunday night primetime, and it's the same week one matchup we had last year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Dallas Cowboys. This game is in Dallas, however, and we are split again. You're going with the home team, the Dallas Cowboys, especially after a training camp where Tom Brady was less involved, wasn't really there in the preseason as much, came out of retirement this year. Does some of that drama lead into your pick here, or really what's your thought process in this matchup?
Tom Brady is a game-breaking leader and a guy that, your team can rally behind. And I think with his presence not being there for part of the offseason especially a crucial part of the offseason, it's going to be a big deal, especially with no Bruce Arians around. So you already lost a guy that was your true voice as a head coach last season. Todd Bowles, good coach. Have some questions about him being a head coach, though. We've seen his stint with the Jets. There were some ups and some downs, but at the end of the day, I think Tom Brady is the true engine and voice behind all of the teams he's been on. And with him not being there during, a lot of the things happening during the offseason, I think they're going to look a little rusty week one. I think Dallas is going to take it.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. My matchup here to watch, Trayvon Diggs, Mike Evans. Mike Evans has been one of the league's best receivers the last 7 or 8 years. And Trayvon Diggs, a very polarizing player. A lot of people who watch highlights say, wow, Trayvon Diggs is amazing. He gets so many interceptions, creates a lot of turnovers. Is he going to do that against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Or is he liable here to get destroyed down the field and really taken advantage of by this Bucs receiving core that, has Mike Evans, but also has added in some other good players as well. Russell Gage is a guy who can run out of the slot a ton. They brought in Julio Jones. I'm not sure how much of an impact he'll have week one here, but ultimately I like Tampa's receiving core against Dallas's secondary enough to pick Tampa on the road here. Although I think it's going to be a very good game again. Last year, it came down to the final possession. I think we could be in similar territory this year with just how good both of these teams are in the NFC. which brings us to our final game of the week, Monday Night Football. And we have Russell Wilson returning to Seattle, which is going to be a very emotional game, but I'm not sure how thrilling of a game this is going to be. Seattle's arguably one of the worst rosters in the league, but they do have a great coach in Pete Carroll. Austin, I'm really interested in your thoughts in this game. How competitive will this matchup be? I know we both have Denver pulling this one out.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's lucky they're at home, because I think this could have been a butt whooping if it were the other way around. Denver having to go on the road in a very, toxic and tough environment to play in Seattle. And I think it's going to be tough for Russell Wilson to kind of get over those emotions, but I definitely see Denver taking this. They're going to run the ball effectively. They have two really good backs. Obviously, Russell Wilson, two phenomenal receivers, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, are going to play a big factor in this one as well. Defensively, Denver is, miles ahead of Seattle as well. I'm sorry, Seattle fans. It's not looking great in this matchup.
Yeah, Seattle fans, you're going to want to stay tuned to the channel for some of our mock drafts likely, because I just don't think this is really your year just based on the talent on the roster. Now, could Pete Carroll pull out a miracle and, maybe unravel something that looks really good? Maybe, but Geno Smith's your starting QB in week 1. The only thing I'm bummed about for this matchup is that Drew Lock isn't the QB1 for Seattle and somehow pull off a miraculous win against his old squad. I would have loved to see that, but ultimately we're not in line for that. Geno Smith's the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks for the foreseeable future, and Russell Wilson just outplays him in pretty much every element of football and will get the win here against his former squad in somewhat maybe dramatic fashion, because again, like you said, Austin, they're going to be in Seattle. The 12s are going to be loud. We'll see what happens. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy this video. It was a ton of fun to record. I'm so glad Pick'em Predictions is back so that I can continually get my butt whooped by the Wizard. Thanks guys again so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like. Austin, thanks so much for hopping on here and sharing with the viewers your correct analysis and opinions. Thanks guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.